is something meaner than you.
Sometimes you can't predict what evil's gonna do.
This one's got it all. Werewolves, vampires, ghosts, cowboys, even the devil himself. We are talking Unnatural from director Whit Whitman, who also co-wrote the movie. And this one stars former wrestler Al Snow and is a Western horror action movie. So the movie focuses on Al Snow's character, who is a tough as old leather grandpa who saves his grandkids from a werewolf attack and takes them with him because their parents were killed. So he's on the road wanting to kind of hunt different monsters. At the same time, there is a small town which is ran by a kind of vampire sheriff, and these two kind of parties cross paths, and what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss Unnatural. So this is a low budget action horror movie. It is mostly a character based movie, surprisingly. Now I think there's two reasons for that. One is a positive one. He wants to build out the kind of the characters and, you know, have likeable protagonists and even interesting antagonists. It also maybe doesn't want to spend a lot of money on set pieces and VFX, but there you go. But let's talk about what I think works in this movie's favour, and let me start with that positive, because I do think this is the movie's biggest strength, is that this movie genuinely has some likeable and interesting characters. I was never a massive wrestling fan, but I did used to watch some wrestling when I was younger, and I did see Al Snow as a wrestler, but I gotta say here, I thought he was a fantastic, like, grumpy, weathered old kind of cowboy with a real sort of, you know, sort of like crotchety sort of outlook on life. And I thought he made a great character, and his interactions with his two grandchildren, even though I don't think the acting is necessarily the best, I still kind of really enjoyed it. I enjoyed their chemistry. And even, as I say, maybe these child actors, not the best actors, but they were still quite charming and sort of likeable enough where I was kind of quite enjoying the kind of this little trio of characters, all of whom are very different. You know, we have this, as I say, this kind of grizzled old cowboy. We have the girl who is sort of psychic and is able to sort of see ghosts. And the boy is like sort of maybe autistic, but very highly intelligent with kind of like problems and sort of mechanics and things like that. So they make an interesting trio, and, you know, Al Snow's character plays like the reluctant hero. He doesn't really want to have to kind of look after his grandkids. He has been out of their lives for the most of it, but, you know, he's kind of almost like a little bit lone wolf and cubs, I guess you want to say. You know, a trope which has been very successful recently with the likes of The Mandalorian. Here he's got two cubs though. And I just quite liked it, and that sort of that relationship that grows through time and experience and stuff. And I did feel that relationship was quite sort of tangible, because the movie does spend a lot of time with these characters and sort of growing them. I also think they did something interesting with the kind of antagonist here. Now, I've mentioned there's various supernatural entities that show up in this movie, but our main threat is vampires. And the kind of the main vampire, if you like, is the head of this, or the sheriff of this town. But they give him something interesting where, you know, he has to go and kill people, but he doesn't do it that much. But in return, he kind of keeps the town safe and in, you know, without any kind of crime and stuff. So he's not like a cut and dry bad guy necessarily. And the townsfolk are a bit sort of mixed about their kind of feelings towards him. So this movie actually had some sophistication in some regards. So I sort of quite like that. And as I've mentioned, you have a variety of supernatural elements on display here. I mean, some fare better than others. The werewolf is the kind of our initial sort of threat, and they use this kind of werewolf costume that I've seen pop up in a variety of low budget werewolf movies. Seems to be the same sort of design, but nonetheless it's still pretty good. And then we have, as I say, a couple of ghosts pop up. We have the devil that's turning up, so it's a reasonable amount. And the interesting thing in this particular kind of reality, I guess, is that these Western folk kind of know that there's this supernatural sort of stuff that's going on, or at least the majority do, and they just have to sort of like deal with it as like an everyday kind of life. So that I quite enjoyed as well. It's just a little bit of like an alternate reality type sort of situation where we have this, you know, this supernatural is just kind of normal to a large degree. So that was kind of quite fun. Now the movie looks like it's the beginning of a kind of a lower budget franchise. It looks like at least there's 2 more movies in development here, which I presume is going to use the or at least some of the characters from this one. So expect this to be kind of part 1 of a few, I would say. But I think, you know, they do a good enough job here of establishing just some characters that are actually kind of quite likeable. Actually have a little bit of kind of depth to them, and even have like a character arc. Now, where this was filmed, despite it being clearly a kind of a low budget movie, they've used some kind of like Old West town, probably like one of these kind of attractions that you have, which kind of recreates life back in the, you know, the Old West and everything. So I presume that's probably where they filmed it. But as such, you have these kind of like outside external shots of various kind of like of the time in architecture and buildings and the saloon and everything like that. And there's a decent amount of extras, all of whom I think look the part in regards to costuming and hairstyling. It's kind of quite fun. I wouldn't say it's authentic exactly, but it's good enough, I think, where you can kind of lose yourself in the movie and kind of enjoy it for the kind of like the somewhat kind of hokey B-movie adventure that it kind of is. And it does set up like a world that, you know, it looks like it has quite a large mythology, and you can kind of see, you know, it going off into different areas here and there. And even some of the supporting characters I think are pretty good. Like we have this kind of female character who is like the owner of this kind of shop, and I even kind of quite enjoyed her character in somewhat of a kind of a limited screen time. So, you know, I thought the at least some of the kind of the more character-based stuff and the world building was pretty decent. Where this movie doesn't quite work, I have to say, is in the actual action and horror elements. Maybe with the exception of the werewolf attack at the beginning, I feel the rest of it isn't particularly kind of outstanding in any way. The vampires, well, let's just say we don't see actually a hell of a lot of vampires in their full glory. It's mostly them in their human form just talking. You know, so the ghost and the kind of the devil, not in it a whole lot. Some of the VFX here are a little questionable, let me just say, certainly in regards to the ghosts. The vampires was the real missed opportunity for me. As I say, we barely see fangs in this movie. We barely see any type of actual vampiric behaviour. We just told some characters are vampires, and they just talk and interact with everyone like any just a regular person. So that was disappointing. So it's quite light on the actual horror elements. Now maybe this was designed to be more of a family movie, but as I say, the werewolf attack at the beginning at least was reasonably brutal. Maybe not particularly bloody or explicit, but they could have got away with more of these vampires, I would say. Yeah, so that was a little bit of a missed opportunity here. I think I don't even know if the intention with our vampire sheriff was to make him like somewhat of a morally grey character. It's just the fact that he doesn't really do anything evil on screen that kind of makes you think maybe he's not that bad. But I don't know if that was the actual intention. I think that just maybe it was a happy accident. I don't really know. But yeah, there was a missed opportunity here to have these vampires be a little bit more menacing. They seem to be relatively easy to defeat, to be honest with you. And yeah, they could have been more done with them. There could have been more of them, and they certainly could have been more threatening, and certainly could have been made to be a bit more scary, a bit more dangerous, because they're kind of nerfed to a large degree. Now, I was going to rate this movie a 6 out of 10. And as I'm watching a movie, my rating is kind of forming in my head. But then we got to the last gunfight, and it was terrible. So the last sort of action set piece of the movie, I won't go into details and spoil it for you, but oh boy, that was poorly handled. So that knocks it down for me, because this was the finale. This was the climax of the movie, what we've all been building to. And oh boy, yes, there was a gunfight. Yes, there was a reasonable amount of bodies, but boy, it wasn't great. Let me just say that. I won't go into why necessarily. You have to watch it for yourself. But yeah, it's pretty poorly handled. So to me, that actually knocked the movie down quite a bit, because it really wasn't. There's not a lot of action in this movie, and what we did get was quite disappointing. Which leads me to my final point, is that I have to say I think this movie is a little bit too talky for some. Considering this movie is kind of sold as a horror with monsters and werewolves and vampires, there's very little actual kind of like combative scenes in this movie, action really, or horror. It's a very talky movie, and I quite liked the characters, so I kind of didn't mind to a degree, but I have to look at what other people might say and think, yeah, this movie is basically a lot of kind of conversations in one place or another, with very little kind of like set pieces going on around it. And I think that's going to be probably the big crux for some people. So as such, with everything kind of like measured up, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Because I did think that one of the key elements for me is good characters, and I think the movie does do that. But the movie around it could have been a lot more exciting and a lot more going on in it. So there you go. If you have seen it, please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll be curious to see where this sequels go, and I probably will check them out, to be honest, but I hope they maybe put a bit more into it. So yeah, 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.